What is the purpose of religion and our relationship with God? In our first reading, we see what lengths God will go to rescue the Israelites. He will open a path through the sea and make a highway through the desert. In other words, he will move the most impenetrable borders just to have us back. In fact, Good Friday shows us the portrait of a God who does not want to spend eternity without us. And when our God has found us, what then? The prophet Isaiah said that God is not going to remember the events of the past, but make us into something new. This is good news, remarked Pope Benedict, who said, "We are all sinners, but his grace transforms us and makes us new." The purpose of religion and a relationship with God is to make us a new creation. It is not to be used as a hammer over our heads. This is why our gospel story is so frustrating. The scribes and Pharisees put the Lord to the test and used this poor woman as an instrument of their hatred against Jesus. Listen to them bait the trap. "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery." Either Jesus would have to condemn the woman or release her. If Jesus condemned her, they would say that he is not merciful. After all, he said, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost. On the other hand, if Jesus released her, then he was not following the law of Moses, which called for stoning as a punishment. Again, Jesus had said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." The scribes and Pharisees came armed that day with accusations and stones, but Jesus diffused the angry mob by writing on the ground. Ironically, it is only recorded time that Jesus ever wrote anything, and there is no record of what he wrote. Since the accusers invoked the law of Moses, Jesus showed them the very finger of God that penned the law of Moses. He bent down and traced his finger upon the stone of the temple floor to remind them of God's finger that penned the 10 Commandments. Looking up from the ground the first time, Jesus gazed at the scribes and Pharisees with the same eyes that will meet us in judgment. Jesus did not have to condemn those men. They condemned themselves, because soon their consciences became heavier than the rocks they carried. They turned, ran, and hid from God, like Adam and Eve did in the garden. Looking up from the ground the second time, Jesus turned his godly gaze upon the woman and asked, "Woman, where are they?" Remember, if Jesus calls someone woman, like he did to his mother twice, it is a reference to Eve. The problem of our first parents is that they ran, hid, and failed to accept responsibility for their sinful actions, so they lost paradise. This woman, caught in adultery, may not have wanted to stand before Jesus, but she also did not want to leave his presence either. She stood face to face with redemption itself. St. Augustine said, "There stood misery in the presence of mercy." And St. Vincent de Paul reminds us, "Always turn your eyes from the study of your own sin to the contemplation of God's mercy. Devote much more thought to the grandeur of his love for you than of your own unworthiness towards him, to his strength than to your weakness. When you have done this, surrender yourself into God's arms in the hope that he will make you what he requires you to be." By defending the woman, Jesus proved himself a friend of sinners, but only if we first admit that we are a sinner in need of a Savior. We belong to a religion where the admission of guilt is the only condition necessary to be a friend of God. Jesus didn't condemn the woman. Rather, on Good Friday, he would be condemned for her. Jesus never made light of sin, for he assumed the full weight of it by carrying the cross to the hill of Golgotha. For Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen wrote, "Forgiveness costs something, and the full price would be paid on the hill of the 3 crosses, where justice would be satisfied and mercy extended. In confession, Jesus' mercy is accepted."